Welcome to the Lazy CEO podcast, where Jim Schleckser, author of Great CEOs Are Lazy and founder of the CEO Project, features compelling experts and topics for CEOs of mid to large size companies. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome, everybody, to another Lazy CEO podcast. My name is Jim Schleckser. I am your host, and I am the founder of the CEO Project. Well, today, we're going to have some fun. If you are the sum of the people you hang around with most of the time, you're going to find out that I hang out with some amazing people. And I have two of my partners on the call today, Pam Singleton and Julie Walker. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
So Pam and I have been working together really since the beginning of the CEO Project, 17, 18 years, something like that. And Julie, not that far behind her.
Since the beginning of time, I think.
Beginning of time. Yeah, I think Moses was our first client, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And Julie, not that far behind. I think Julie's been with us like 10 years now.
It seems like 10, only because it's been a lot of fun. It's probably been about 6. But I've absolutely loved it. I've absolutely loved it because it's probably the most energizing work you can do is to work with people who are impacting so many lives, working on companies that are, facing challenges. So we're excited to talk to you today. Pam and I can't wait to unload on everything that we've been hearing from our members.
So, this could be, for those that don't know, what we do is we do build CEO peer groups. These are high-powered advisory groups of like size, like complexity CEOs, and they're led by a CEO advisor with deep experience. And that's what Pam and Julie do with us. They work with clients, they work with CEOs. So they work with dozens and hundreds of CEOs over time. So they've got stories, if you will. So this is going to be, three business geeks having fun, basically talking about things we've learned, things we've seen, and frankly, things we think might be interesting for you, because you may not be the only one experiencing some of these items. So why don't we just start with that, which is when you're dealing with a CEO and they're trying to grow their business, what are the top couple of things that you consistently see as barriers that they have to deal with, sort of getting in their way of going to the next level, whether it's 25 to 50 or 50 to 100 or whatever the numbers are? What do you guys see as the top couple? Maybe Pam, you could start us off.
Sure. The one I always see is CEO succession. It's a big blind spot. CEOs are not even trying to find replacements for themselves. Now, I know 67 is the new 42, but people do get hit by buses. And, it's been estimated that more than 30% of private companies and more than 20% of public companies have not even had a conversation about CEO succession.
Wow.
And I think it's not natural to replace yourself. For a founder, the companies are symbols of your success and extensions of your own personalities. And it's relinquishing power, and all those external measurements of success almost equate to admitting your own mortality. But I think even more, CEOs don't know how to go about selecting and grooming the successor. A lot of times they hire internal leaders because they hire executives leaders because they're great operators, but sometimes the founders perceive them as lacking visionary skills to drive the company forward. Mm-hmm. So I've seen CEOs whose businesses are growing 30% a year. Everything looks great on the surface, but the growth of their companies has outpaced their ability to match opportunities with future leaders. So beyond the CEO successors, the bench strength is weak.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. I mean, we're so ego involved in what we do, right? Particularly if we're entrepreneurs, the business is an extension of us. So the idea that we're going to leave it means part of us is dying or going away in some way. So even the conversation around succession is just hard emotionally, I think, which you don't want to admit that, but It's hard. And I think even more when you start the process, you go, even if you don't know when you're going to leave, I can't start somebody in the process unless there's a time frame on it, like a year, 2 years, 3 years, something. So I just put an end date on my involvement at that level in the business, which I think is painful and difficult. How about you, Julie? What do you see as sort of the things that the main barriers that CEOs are dealing with?
I couldn't agree more with Pam, and just want to make a couple of additional points before I move on to another example. One challenge that I'm seeing with some of the folks, and they aren't even founders, they may be multi-generational companies, and they've had success for a while, and they're moving to their first professional non-family member CEO, and they're struggling with that selection, and they're struggling with the cultural transition of a family, truly family oriented, to much more of a professional minded style of operation and decision making. And and the how to manage the transition, how to release the control appropriately, how to what to worry about, what not to worry about. Those are some concerns I'm seeing with multi-generational folks. And it's really the difference between those who are really proactively managing that with professional help, whether it's from us or additional advisors, or who are kind of going it alone. It feels a little bit like drug detox. It's better under medical supervision. How's that? So I think that's one of the things that I'd like to just punctuate on what Pam talked about in terms of CEO succession. A lot of my members at all stages of size are struggling with this sort of mid-level management development.
Yeah.
This bench strength, whether it's attracting, retaining, developing them so that they have career space. Some have actually realized that they themselves as the CEO and their executive team are all of the same generation. And there's going to be almost this moment where we're going to be passing things off to the children, and are the children ready? And how do we get them ready? And so I think that's another key piece that relates in this whole notion of succession planning for sustainable growth of the company beyond the survivor's hand management, or the CEO's hand management.
It's critical to point out that more than 60% of value creating roles reside in middle management. And yet this category of people is usually overlooked. And it's easy. I don't want to say it's easy to develop bench strength, but help them gain experience and prepare them to lead. Leadership's learned on the job. Assign them to new roles. Let them prove that they can be stretched and actually handle uncertainty. And if you monitor their growth, understand their strengths, their gaps, you'll observe their progress over time and get comfortable with them being able to handle future challenges. So,
I talk about this middle management conundrum, Julie, because it's easy to hire executives. We want to hire direct reports, and we want to hire people at the pointy end of the spear, if you will, like doing the work, if you will, because we get that. And as the company grows, the distance between those two things start to stretch, right? And that's where middle management comes in, which is profoundly unsexy to invest in. Like, nobody wants to invest in middle management. We had a Joey Coleman on the other day, and he talked about the level of engagement. He said 77% of people were not engaged at work. So, but here's the bright spot, 25%-ish those are your future middle managers. So the trick, I think, in thinking about this is, who are the 1 in 4 that are really posting up and showing up every day? And those are the ones we invest in the way Pam talked about, like give them more assignments, stretch them, special work, throw them in the deep water. Because it's hard. You're like, well, who do I put in? The answer is there's 1 in 4. Figure out who they are and then invest in those. So, but it's hard. And we've seen companies stop on growth because they don't have middle management, by the way.
Right.
So.
Totally agree. And I think it is, and then they get into this awful cycle of bad hires.
Yeah.
Who aren't going to be culture fits, and even further driving away potentially some of those hypo folks because they don't see opportunity to grow. So one of the things I saw see broadly as a challenge there is when folks delegate the responsibility to HR versus to their line leaders. And I love the way Pam articulated the way you develop people's on the job with accessible coaching. And that's not done by a function who's simply tracking or, providing support to the line leaders to develop their folks. And I love your push there, Pam.
One of the lines in my first book was talent is too important to delegate to HR. So my cousin is in HR. She took great exception to my point there. She goes, "That's our job." I go, "Yeah, but leaders need to hire people. Leaders, followers follow leaders. They have to see them. They can't just get hired by HR. There's no way."
And I hate to say this to Jim, but there are a lot of clients who actually repeat to me the 70% rule. So if somebody is 70% capable of achieving, of doing a task, give it to them.
Yeah.
And I always think about that when you give me tasks, Jim.
Yeah. Well, it's designed to give somebody,
on you, Pam.
It's designed to give somebody permission to delegate. Right. Because otherwise I don't know when I'm supposed to delegate. So, and when you've got, it's 70%, when I think it's 70, I can delegate it. It's like this relief. Like I know that it's okay to do it at that point. That's why the rule exists. So what else are you seeing, Julie? We interrupted you there.
I was just going to say, sorry, something I'm seeing a lot of the CEOs I work with challenged by is, managing and navigating the disruptors that are going on right now in the industry from a technology standpoint. So
external environment disruptors,
external environment types of elements. And one of those happens to be things like, how do you use technology to support your operation, and what should be replaced with technology and AI tools, and how do you get your organization that has habits of doing things one way to actually embrace and lead this transition. So that is a challenge, and I'm seeing almost a bifurcation of my members where there's the hide under the rock, pretend it's not happening, hope for the best, and then the ones that are really leaning into the disruptors and changing the way they're hiring, changing the way they're instructing their folks to operate. And ChatGPT is a resource that can exponentially improve the productivity of a smart developer, right? Instead of just having to develop by yourself, you're developing now crowdsourcing a whole bunch of other capabilities. And it could, some of my members have said I can get 6x the capability out of my tech developers when they are leveraging open source and crowdsourcing, and they're just really smart about that.
Nice.
So that's just another one and that's one disruptor, but there's probably several disruptors that are external that the notion of how do you lean in, only the CEO can set the tone on that.
Yeah.
I see my clients hiring AI specialists and seeking out consultants on AI to figure out how they can use it for the low-hanging fruit in their organization, the low-hanging stuff that can be automated and improved proactively.
I was reading an article from, like 1882 that talked about the pace of change has never been faster than it is today. And, they went on and on about yesterday is gone and tomorrow is going to be different. We have to embrace all this massive change that's occurring in our environment. And like 150 years later, we're talking about exactly the same thing. So, this is like always true. There will always be disruptors, and we just have to think about how we're going to deal with them. And I think this, the continuum that you described, Julie, of leaning in versus hiding under the rock is really about the technology adoption curve, right? So some people got to have the latest, greatest, current, most sexiest stuff. And other people I'm going to let everybody else taste the wine and then I'm going to have some. I'm not going to go first. And for me, and I think why, because just picking on ChatGPT or even AI broadly, it is a technology looking for a use case where it creates immense value. And I don't think that's fully been developed yet. So people are trying all these different scenarios. I think over time, we're going to find a more limited set of really clearly high value uses of it, and that's where it's going to gain traction in a significant way. Coding augmentation might be one of them, right? Paralegals might be another. There'll probably be 20 or 30 of these things, right?
Anything that relates to research likely will be a component. Meaning you need to research and ingest a lot of information and synthesize it quickly. Yes.
Yep. Although just realize that these AIs can have fantasies and illusions. Because they're like proximity based, they go, well, this article was never written, but it should have been written. Like this author and this author probably should have written an article that looks like this. And so they cite it in the work. ChatGPT does. You have to actually put human eyes on that and check the work, because it has these fantasies or illusions or whatever you want to call them that are, so you just got to be a little bit careful. If it was brain surgery, I'd say triple check the ChatGPT stuff before you do the brain surgery.
Scary
recommendation, right? What about like working with their executive team? What are you seeing, struggles or people that are really gifted in terms of holding their team accountable and the organization accountable? What is that looking like for you? Because I think a lot of people struggle with accountability. It's always way up the lists. What do you see there?
Rare talent to hold people accountable.
Yeah.
The people who I see as most successful are people who are process oriented, who are trying to establish systems for holding people accountable. We give them a vision and identify what's most important, and everybody's day jobs and attach some KPIs to it. But they're system-oriented people as a rule. Some might say they are engineers of a sort.
I think she's almost complimenting you, Jim, which is rare. Normally, she's got her elbows out when she talks about engineers.
No, it was a subtle insult. It was like, they're engineers. Those types.
But it's rare that you get CEOs who establish a consistent process, especially the companies I deal with, which are under a couple of 100 million. And even further, under 60 or so.
Have you seen a system or a tool that people are using that's really effective? Because why roll your own? They must exist, right?
Well, I hear about EOS, and
that one's popular.
And then I have, and after they mention EOS, then there's they go on and on about how clunky it is to enforce. I'm a fan of Patrick Lencioni and the playbook and what's most important right now methodology. Yep.
I think 40X is popular. 4 Disciplines of Execution is popular as well with a lot of people.
5 Rocks.
What's that?
5 Rocks, meaning, people can only deliver successfully 5 goals. Right. And so you force individuals to what typically happens in the 5 Rocks is they're not assigned to you. You are self disclosing what you're going to get done because you're closest to the work, and your boss's job is to approve that. So I see that as well.
The other one is Rockefeller Habits, or
yes, great book.
Scaling Up, which is Vern Harnish's stuff. And here's my read on the whole dang thing, which is it doesn't matter. Pick one and be consistent, and you'll be fine. Right? Agreed. They're all okay. They've all got their warts, and they're some are better at this, better at that. But it doesn't matter. Just do it consistently. You'll get a better outcome than not. It's a 1 versus a 0, right? Having something versus not is better. Interesting. So what about like when you get the hard decisions? How are you seeing people deal with this? Somebody on the executive team, maybe even somebody you brought in early in the organization isn't working out. What guidance do you give to CEOs when they're facing that situation?
Well, the guidance I always give is hire slow, fire fast. That's not what I see. It's the opposite. And usually those are the messes that we work with the CEOs to clean up, and the cost is dire. When you are getting consistent advice from all of your advisors that an individual in your organization is not working, and you keep delaying, when you finally execute on that, the whole organization swarms you and thanks you. Mm-hmm. And it's a real sad experience. Unfortunately, Jim, I see that people almost have to have that once. Yeah. learning before they'll listen to you.
So they need a train wreck.
Yep.
They do. It's a shame, because it should be advice that should just be absolutely a golden rule of executive selection and management.
It's hard to admit you've made a hiring mistake. You've spent all this money with the recruiters and all this time to onboard, and it's just hard to admit it. I talked to somebody last night who hired somebody who wasn't the right person for the job, and they're going through a process of redefining the job, and hopefully the person will understand that they don't have the skill set to do, but that's going to take a couple of months.
So they're going to try to persuade the person that it was their idea that they should leave.
Yeah, or that the job has changed, when really they didn't think through the future, what the job needed to be in the future, as opposed to what it needed to be right then.
Right. Interesting. Wow.
And Jim, I'd say it's even more painful when you've promoted someone from within. And where that typically goes wrong isn't at the 70% lean in mark. It's where you literally selected someone who's really good at managing up to you and has snowed, but doesn't have the skills to bring the rest of the organization along. And you didn't take the time to treat them like an external hire for a critical position and evaluate that capability, get 360 feedback. There's simple tools. They don't take that long, but those steps are skipped.
Yeah. I think your concept there, Julie, is really important, that everybody has different levels of skill on the manage down, manage across, and manage up, right? And so sometimes as a leader, I'm not going to call it sucking up, but they're great at managing up to you, and they are weaker at the other two skills. And then when you elevate them, those deficiencies really show up. They haven't built the social network with the people around them to be able to gain support and influence and so forth. And they're not great at managing their team down below them, but they did a great job of managing you, right? So you have to be really careful. I think I want to go further forward than that, which is the hiring process. So, what do you see working there? And one flaw that I see in that process, particularly if you're an entrepreneur that's a bit of a scrappy state school kind of person, right? Which I went to state school, so don't get me wrong, I love them. Somebody shows up with this big resume, right? They went to fill in the blank Ivy League school. They got a master's at some crazy great place. They worked at McKinsey or Procter & Gamble or GE or some phenomenal big name company. They're going to be perfect for my company. Look at this. They're willing to work for me. This is incredible. And 9 times out of 10, I could see Pam smiling. 9 times out of 10, it's like that's your first train wreck, right? But that's one I see, is just they get dazzled by the resume, and it's just a giant mistake of people that do big don't always do small. I don't know, but let's talk about the hiring process. What do you see working and not working in the hiring process for the people you work with?
I see not working is when they develop activity-based job descriptions.
Okay.
What
do you mean when you say that, Pam? I'm not sure I understand.
So the CFO will do all these different things, as opposed to making it outcomes-based, which is the CEO is responsible for supporting processes to deliver revenues of this with margins of that.
Okay.
And so they welcome busyness as opposed to defining what success means for that position.
Got it. Interesting. That's probably helpful later in the cycle, like either A, you're making it, or B, you're not. Let's go back to the job description. We clearly told you what you wanted and you're not doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. How about you, Julie? What's working?
I do think that there is a really important distinction between the title love that you talked about, Jim, and the awe-inspiring background in education, et cetera, and can they get it done in my culture? And do they have the hands-on knowledge that is current about how to do the job? Or because I see a lot of smaller companies, Pam and I work with ranges, whether they're, in the 20 to 50, 70, million, or they're upwards, of 500 million to $1 billion. the smaller companies being enamored with CMOs and just titles with great prestigious backgrounds. And what they don't realize is those people haven't practiced their function for 10 plus years in a hands-on way. So then they hire them and they immediately want to build a staff. That's what they know how to manage. So I think that there's a total gap in the interview process of discussing how do you get this done. What is what's been on your personal priority list over the last couple of years? What did you do specifically on that to understand, can they do the job without a staff? And you might even also feel like people are too quick to start selling them on why to come before they've really pressed them on all the horrible reasons they shouldn't. because they're afraid of scaring them off. And I it's unfortunate because there's such an expense to the mistake that you really should have somebody who gets where they're coming.
I see most frequently that the people don't have the transition experience of taking the company from where it is right now to where you want to go. And that transition experience, understanding that the world is going to change and change again and change again and change again, means that they don't handle the growth well, and they're just not the right people for the job.
Interesting. We talk about skill and will, right? So there's the technical matter, and then there is it a good cultural fit. And I think that process of exploring will, like, do you actually want to do the things that need to be done in this job? Will you be happy doing them? Is a really big deal. I had a guy I worked for a while, and he was a big time Allied Signal executive. And I used to joke that when Paul would drop a pencil, 6 people would be running after it to go sharpen it for him, right? He hadn't worked, if you will, in that way in a very long time. And I love the definition of sort of pure manager and working manager. I actually actively use that, right? So you see a lot of what I would call pure managers coming from these larger companies. They're very good at managing people and teams, and but working manager, where you're actually going to do some of the job and you're going to manage people like that, they haven't done that in a really long time. Maybe never, who knows? I think that's a distinction to bring to the table when you're hiring at more moderately sized company. Like a VP of sales, I go, you're going to have a couple of major accounts that I expect you to generate revenue on, for example.
Right. And people may think, well, gosh, I've done that before. It won't be so hard to do it again. I'll just roll up my sleeves. And yet it is hard to do it again and go back.
You forget how much energy you had when you were 28. It's different. It's just different.
Jim, just while you're on it, because you just brought up the VP of sales, I'd love to talk for a second about the mistakes that I've seen people make and then unwind on combining sales and marketing. Put them together. They think they're the same thing. Frankly, the salesperson becomes distracted with the marketing. It seems fun. It's it isn't necessarily so, but once they unwound it, what they realized is they either had hired a marketer or a salesperson, and they are not the same. And so I always advise folks to avoid that like the plague if they can.
So give me the distinction real briefly for everybody. What is the sales function? What is the marketing function, and the difference?
So the sales function is 100% externally facing, getting new logos for your company. Okay. Or selling more to your current logos. And they could even be, servicing account management as part of sales. But, those are the 2 things I would hold someone accountable for. More logos, more money per logo, more uses of all of our tools, all of our lines, et cetera, whatever it might be. In marketing, you're about leads, generating leads. And it's not the same job. And the website and the branding and group events at a trade show, et cetera. And the types of people who want to worry about how we present our brand name, which is a strategic decision, and it's usually based on insights from your client base, are very different than the people who are actually holding a spear and want to go hunt all the time and, you know, take care of folks. It's just a very different mind.
Interesting.
Okay.
But when you're small, do you have an option but to put them together?
Well, I've had CEOs who've held on to the sales job themselves too long. There's a lot of, especially founder CEOs tend to be the best salesmen in the company. But I've also seen CEOs successfully pull marketing in under themselves because they also are the brand.
Yep.
That's a much more helpful for small company, in my opinion, is have a marketing practitioner, an executor who knows how to market today. The most important thing that you need in marketing is leads and affinity for referrals. So it's really about how do you get more people to say, I love this, you know, CEO project more than anything else in the world. You have to join. These are evangelists.
Right.
Who cares about that more than the CEO?
Right. And marketing's job is to understand the value proposition of the product or service that you're selling and refine the messaging. Make sure the brand is consistent. The external branding is consistent with that is consistent, and make sure the messaging, make sure that the website reflects it. It's hard to measure the impact of all this stuff, this intangible stuff that marketing does. And so lots of times people get frustrated and hire a sales support person instead of an actual marketer. You know, somebody who's more of a marketing sales coordinator than an actual marketer, but define it as marketing.
Interesting. Yeah, this is just a huge area of growth. I think you touched on maybe our last topic, Julie, but just CEOs that get stuck in a role. So we see this pretty frequently, particularly on the smaller side, where you're the number one, whatever, accountant sometimes, which is crazy, right? Or marketer or salesperson or engineer or whatever they happen to be good at. And as the company grows, they continue to hold on to that role. What guidance do you give when you find a CEO that's still doing a significant role in the company as it scales? How do you help them with that?
I always tell them that being CEO is a job in and of itself, and continuing to do what we call player mode, you know, the specific job is better left to other people because you have other responsibilities. You have to run and lead the company, not just be the top salesperson.
Nice. How about you, Julie? How do you engage with that?
Two ways. You know, the first one is you have a choice. You can hire a new CEO or you can hire a new salesperson. You decide, because you're going to do a disservice to one of the two jobs at the size your company has now grown.
Right.
The second piece is much more tactical. When I find folks who really struggle, like they're on their third or fourth attempt at trying to delegate this job that they love so dearly to somebody else or hire somebody else, and I say you need to write down everything that you do that is magical in that role that you value, and that's the job description, because you're hiring, again, someone for title without explaining what it is that you do that has delivered success. And when they come in, you do zero onboarding because you're so enamored with their title and experience that you let them almost like with enough rope to kill them, you know, to drown themselves, hang themselves, whatever it is. So I just say it's important that you, since you're so good at this job, write down everything that you do and share that with folks when you meet with them and see if that's work they have the will to do, to use your expression earlier, Jim.
Lots of times people are trying to replace themselves as that marketeer, for example, or top salesperson. That's better. And so when they see people who are not exactly like themselves, they may not believe that that person is capable of getting the job done. And so they're irrationally biased in favor of people who look like them.
You know, I once in a while, when I bump into that, I'll say, you're looking for somebody that's as good as you are, and you are exceptional. Usually as a CEO, it's something. So you know what that person that you're looking for is doing right now? They're running another company because they're not going to come and work for you because they're that good, so stop looking for that person. You're not going to find them. So, well, hey, on that note, I think our time, we could go for hours and that probably doesn't work for everybody. So, any just last thought from both of you? One last thought that message you'd give as you deal with a CEO, like, as we close out. Pam, why don't you start with a thought?
Well, I think CEOs need to really think through what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years, the foreseeable future. Really think about future scenarios, that changing market forces, sector pivots, divestitures, M&A, and consider some what ifs on the economy. Is our strategy going to change? And that's where some of the CEO's best time is spent, and thinking about what that organization structure needs to be to cope with the what if scenarios of the world, as opposed to just solving what you need right now.
Awesome. How about you, Julie?
And just to that end, a lot of CEOs I'm seeing are leaning into scenario planning versus singular, one single goal, one single set of action plans. They're going to scenario planning. So I think Pam's advice is excellent for navigating through these transitions that are happening in external forces. The second thing I would give as an advice is really lean into talent development of your bench, not just your direct reports, but their direct reports. Freeing up your personal time to be able to help personally identify those 1 in 4, Jim, folks that don't report to you, but that are the magic future of your company is a critical role of a CEO. And you as the CEO have so much more impact on their willingness to stay with your company than any performance plan, phantom stock money. Your legacy. Access to you is really what those folks joined and want. And it's the cheapest way to, in my opinion, ensure your future success.
I love that. And I think, skip levels, walking around and FaceTime, particularly with your A players, is they expect it, they want it. And that will, I think you're right, keep them there. My last note will be just, it's a heck of a lonely job that you do as a CEO. You have very few people you can go to who get it, that get what you're going through, that maybe have been through it before. And there's a little bit of a commercial, but this is where CEO peer groups fall in. They can be that infrastructure for you, that give you a place to say, hey, I'm really struggling with this and I just need to talk it out with people that get it. And not just empathetic, but technically get it and empathetic at the same time. So whether it's us or somebody else, I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge advocate. I'd say that's an important element of your business system as you move forward. So on that note, I think we're going to end. Julie and Pam, way fun. We'll do this again sometime because, we didn't even scratch the surface. So thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next time on the Lazy CEO podcast. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by the CEO Project. At the CEO Project, we work with CEOs to help them grow their business. And our members represent billions of dollars of revenue and profit. And frankly, amongst all of us, we've probably made every mistake in the book, including some you haven't made yet. So if you want to learn from the experience of a bunch of really seasoned CEOs, we're a great place to hang out. In this podcast, what you're going to hear are some of those ideas, concepts, and things that are just going to help you on your journey. If you want to find out more, reach out to us at theceoproject.com, or you can contact me personally at jim@theceoproject.com. Happy listening.
Thanks for listening to the Lazy CEO podcast. We'll see you next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes, and check out our website, www.theceoproject.com.